Hi everyone, here we are. It's right on 1 o'clock. Good to see everyone today and have you back for philosophical geometry class. So I'm gonna put you in place. Remember, if you wanna see the view that looks like that, go on to Facebook Live and you'll be able to see it on Facebook Live a lot better and easier. But if you want to maybe stream both, you probably can too if you've got a computer around. That's another way to do it. So here we are today. It's again a rainy day here in Southern California. It's supposed to always be sunny here, but it's not always sunny. So looking forward to spending this time with you today. And the picture that I have in front of us here, move it a little bit so that the Instagram crowd could see it, is the flower of life. I made this last night and I was thinking about class today and what I wanted to cover with you guys today. And actually it's about the flower of life, and it's also about the Vesica Piscis. So we're gonna practice this, and also we're gonna try a little bit today to use this framing device, which is a little bit different. I drew this last night with this right here, this little the circular frame that you can do all these different circular sizes. So those of you that have trouble with the compass, you can switch over to from this to this, and it works great actually. It works really well. In fact, in some ways, I find it a bit easier to get really exacting circles because the circle never changes, whereas with the compass, sometimes you'll get tiny movements of this thing, so it's going to end up going a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, and then it kind of messes up your whole thing. I use both. I tend to use the compasses more because it lets me do certain things that this doesn't let me do. In fact, this doesn't really let me change the circle size at all, except for the ones that are exactly the sizes that they've basically framed here, which is fine, but I like to use both. But we're going to talk about both today, and we're going to actually talk about what the flower of life actually is and why the flower of life is so critically important to all geometry and to Metatron's cube and to the entire existence that we're in. In fact, one of the things that's really interesting about the flower of life is that everywhere you see these circle overlaps, where one circle overlaps another, it creates this sort of leaf looking thing here, right? Or it's a petal, like a petal of a flower. In 3 dimensions, I actually have one of these I'm going to show you today. Just 1 second. Now, this is a pretty cool box for this thing that I want to show you. This was made by my friend and colleague, Michael Evans, who's a geometer. And he is very unique in that he has kind of taken a backwards view at looking at all of geometry, which sometimes can be super wonderful and genius. And in this case, that's exactly what it was. So what he did is, instead of looking at the hard shapes or the linear lines of geometry, he was looking at these petals, right? And these petals actually create this shape, and he was kind enough to give this to me as a Christmas present this year. What's really cool about this is if I fire a laser into this, it will actually reflect the light in very unique ways. Let's see if I can give you a demo on this. It's pretty cool. Okay, can you guys see this? All right. So if I shine it, what you guys cannot see is that when I shine this light into this trion ray, and that's the name of this, it basically reflects in different dimensions. So it basically splits. If I take it down the center of it as well, it splits the light to all over my room, which is really fascinating. So this petal of the flower of life is really critical to everything. In fact, it defines for us how all geometry is made. You might be wondering, well, why does this thing play such an important role? Well, first of all, it's a shape that we see all the time, right? It's kind of like the Vesica Piscis is also like a thicker version of this. This would just be the petal part. The Vesica is going to be two circles that overlap each other, and it looks like the female genitalia that is basically coming out of the center of it, which is birthing all life and all light. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing. I'm amazed by it. So what this is this is a large flower of life, and I challenged everybody a couple of classes ago to try to draw something like this, a very large flower of life, and see how far you can get with it. And some of you did send it to me. Thank you, great job, very, very well done. But today, we're gonna talk about this, okay? And what this is, and those of you that are on Facebook especially, you can look at this in landscape mode, so it looks like it's this way. If you just simply turn your phone, right? It's kind of like the old school way of doing things. You can turn your phone and make sure that the flip screen function on your phone is turned off so that it doesn't move around on you when you're trying to do that. But you can turn it sideways and be able to see all of it just as if you were looking at it in that orientation. See if I can turn this light off because it looks like I've got some glare today on this. There we go. I think it's because of the rain or something today. Okay, so basically we have a universe based on ratios, and I'll show this to both of you guys at the same time so you can see this really well. And what this is two circles that are overlapping each other, right? These two circles that are overlapping each other. Let's see if I can pull this up. These two circles that are overlapping each other are very special because what it's doing is it's creating all numbers out of this. You might say, well, how in the heck is this creating all numbers? I don't understand that. How would that be working at all? And what we see is that, in fact, it is creating all numbers through their square roots. So, to give you an example here, you've got circle 1 right here and circle 2 right here. And this is creating this same kind of shape as the Trion ray, except this is a thicker Trion ray, and that's what this is called, the Vesica. Now, not everybody knows what I'm going to teach you today. In fact, most people don't. Even people that are really good in geometry and mathematics don't know this. I taught this to a mathematics professor, in fact, at Chapman University about a year ago, and he was stunned to find out this truth. So what this is basically showing is as follows. Let's assume that you have one circle that has a radius of 1 unit. Let's just say it's 1 inch. For lack of a better term, it could be 1 centimeter, it doesn't matter. It just simply doesn't matter. But it's 1 unit, let's just say it's 1 unit. And with that 1 unit of reference point, then when you overlap these two circles where one of the circles is intersecting the midpoint of the other circle and vice versa, then a line gets made out of this. So this is the two circles overlapping. A line gets made out of this that's right down the center here. Now, incredibly, the length of this line will come out to be exactly 1.732 units, right? If the radius of one of these circles is 1, okay? Now, that 1.732 may not sound that important to you guys on the phone, but that is giving us a perfect mathematical constant, which is the square root of 3. So now this creates perfectly the square root of 3. So this length from here to here is the square root of 3. Now another thing that will happen is that the square root of 2 will also get formed, and there's a few ways to form the square root of 2. One way is you can go from here to here, Or another way is what I've done here is I've drawn the flower of life underneath this structure. And the flower of life has intersecting, overlapping waves. I also drew, as you notice here, a rectangle around these two circles. And with this rectangle that's going around the two circles, it has flower of life lines that you can see that are horizontal and vertical, where the flower of life would be overlapping, just like the picture I just showed you of the flower of life. And at each one of those overlapping points, from the center, it's giving you some very specific reference. And that reference is creating another number. So for example, from here down to here, so this is creating a rectangle around this vesica shape right here. So let's make a full rectangle around this like this, and the length of this diagonal line will be exactly the square root of 5. Wow. So I can keep going and following this out, and guess what? Every single number that ever was and ever will be found as overlapping intersections of the flower of life off of a Vesica Piscis, and it's doing it in its square root form. That means that it's the infinite form of the number. You could say it's the wave of the number. Now we look at the world in a dualistic sense, and when we look at the world from a duality perspective, what do we think? We think that there's only one side of a number. Well, actually, there are multiple dimensions of a number. One way to look at a number is going to be the way you see it, the number 7. Another way to look at a number would be its 1 over x value. Another way to look at the same number would be its square root. So the number 7 has 3 ways to be looked at, 2 of which that I'm going to mention to you today. There are actually many more besides that, but 2 of which are infinite irrational numbers. One of them will be 1 over 7, which is 0.14285714. That's actually what's called a repeating rational, but it's infinite. And then you have another form, which is going to be fully irrational, which is the square root of 7, which is 2.449, I think. Either 2.6449 or 2.449. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's an irrational number. That's another way to look at the number 7. Nature has created its own compression algorithm for memory and efficiency, because we have the law of conservation of energy and efficiency and everything. And the compression for these infinite waves of numbers is the number we see. And the compression algorithm is the equation we call square root, or just the 1 over x reciprocal value. So isn't that interesting? So what we're going to do today is we're going to practice drawing this Vesica Piscis, so you can know how to draw a vesica. And now you know something that most mathematicians don't have a clue about. And you can prove it to them. So when you show this to them, we have not published a paper on this, but we probably will at some stage. We have such a backlog of different mathematical papers that we have to write. But that every single number comes out of the Vesica Piscis through its square root value when you overlay a flower of life and its intersections on it, that is incredible. It is absolutely beautiful. So with that, let's go ahead and get our book here and start drawing. Okay, so now just with everything else, just like everything else, we're going to start with our line. So get out your pencils and your paper, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So hopefully you can see this. Let's go ahead and move this up, and maybe I'll move this down just a bit this way. There we go. All right. There. All right. So I'm going to draw the line right down the center. How many of you guys participated in different meditation things over the weekend? I thought that was really great that people did that. And I got to participate on one of them, which was called Unify. And I actually gave a presentation also on that on Sunday. Okay, so now we've got our center point. So now the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and decide what our radius value is going to be, right? And let's use let's use something, I'm trying to think of something that would be the right size for what we want to do. Okay, so let's say we're going to use 2 will be our radius value so that we can actually have something large enough. I could go something smaller, but it wouldn't really look that good. So let's use 2 as the radius value. Then it's easy for us to make conversions back, okay? And the easy way to draw the vesica that I've found is to just start from the center and then draw a circle. Okay. So now you're going to do this like this. Then you take the other side of the circle, one of the sides of the circle. We're going to create a vesica right across to the middle here. Now I just want to make sure everyone can see this. The lighting's kind of weird in here today. And so now you can see this vesica, right? So that's a Vesica Piscis right here. And we can intersect this with a line here. So we just crossed that point right at the center, and we can do it again right on the other side. Now you may recognize that this looks a lot like a wave doubling thing, because I could continue to go on this. And now let's go ahead and draw another circle here, right, of the same size. Okay, so now we have this cool Vesica Piscis here in the center, which is this shape right here. Now let's see what it's created for us. And we can even measure it to see if this is true. So remember, we just did a circle that was, I get the thing turned around the right way here, okay. So I created a radius of 2. Okay, so the radius is of 2 here. So if I'm going to now measure this line right down the center, I'll just darken it for you so you can see it. Okay, so now let's measure this line to see how long this line is. This line is coming out to just under 3.5 inches. It looks like it's about 3 and 14.5/16. So remember there's 16 separations here on the inches. And so if we cut that in half, it's going to come out to be, because remember I used 2 as the radius, if I cut that in half, it's going to come out to be 1.732. So that's exactly the square root of 3. So this is now giving me a length, and now let's assume that our 2 is actually a 1. So let's just call this 1 unit. So then from here, right, to here is 1 unit, which is also equal to the square root of 1, right? And now we know that this line right here is giving me exactly the square root of 3. Isn't that beautiful? So simple. So let's also look to see what other things we can find in this. First of all, right, if I'm going to now take this, so I'm going to go ahead and make a line here across. Now this part of it is sometimes known by mathematicians, sometimes not, that the square root of 3 and the square root of 2 and the square root of 5 is inherent to the Vesica Piscis is something that is kind of known, not terribly well known, but kind of known by some that are really into geometry. Okay, so now if I measured this from side to side down here, right, this is giving me just under 4.5. And if I cut that in two, it's going to give me a value of 2.236, which equals the square root of 5. Isn't it amazing how two circles literally make all numbers? Okay. And if I take this length right here, that comes out to be just under 3 inches, which comes out to be, looks like this would be 16, 15, 14, 13, yeah, 13 sixteenths. So that's 2 and 13 sixteenths. If I cut that in half, it comes out to be 1.4142, which equals the square root of 2. Isn't that amazing? How can people say that the universe is all based on randomness and entropy? I don't see it. Randomness to me is simply the word that we use to call something that we have not perceived the pattern that's already there in it yet. We just haven't seen it yet. Randomness is a term we use to describe things, in my opinion, and I make random number generators. And I don't believe in randomness at all, even though we can define it scientifically as random, etc. There is no randomness in my mind whatsoever. Everything has pattern and everything has purpose. And that's also true in your life. It's true of all of our lives. Everything has pattern, everything has purpose. So I could keep taking this, right? And because now I can draw, around this and make a rectangle. Just like this. Okay. And understanding how all this stuff works and comes together helps you understand how your universe works and comes together. Somebody asked me the other day, it's like, what does any of this have to do with what's happening in the world today? And my answer to that is, what doesn't it have to do with what's happening in the world today? Because this is exactly how we're shaping our perception of the world around us. We just don't know it. We're doing it in subtle ways. We're doing it in ways that we can't even recognize necessarily. So if I keep taking this, now I could take this line from here and knowing as well that there are certain positions that are going to be related to the flower of life. If I drew the flower of life inside of here, right, and I could do that really simply, and all I would have to do is I would use this same radius, right, or half radius, and I would start making smaller circles inside here. Just like that. And everywhere these circles overlap is going to give me another number. Now, imagine how the universe is doing this every day inside of how it makes flowers. All I would do is just keep going like this. And I could go with smaller and smaller circles and just make this flower of life pattern continue on and on. And every time I cut it smaller, I'm creating another number series. Everywhere these lines overlap creates another conjunction or pathway or portal for that magic to happen. Nature is so incredibly beautiful. And if we're not careful, we can completely miss or ignore its beauty. And I think that's probably what's happened in the world and why we are where we are. And nature has now given us an opportunity to take inventory. See how pretty that is already? And at each of these points now, I can draw a line. It's amazing to me that this isn't taught as standard curriculum in schools. It should be. Anything that teaches a higher consciousness has systematically been removed from our educational system. To me, that's just a real travesty. Outright. You know, all the philosophers and polymaths were always looking for the thing to prove the signature of a universal consciousness. That's what Isaac Newton did. That's what Kepler did. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just drawing lines here where all these intersections occur. And everywhere these lines show up, where these lines are intersecting, I can draw a line from center and it will give me another number. What you're seeing has never been taught anywhere before. Well, not at least in this era of time. So I thought I would give you guys this special view of how the universe sees itself. And maybe we are just the universe observing itself. Maybe it's not just I as in I am. Maybe it's actually I. Maybe like a window to this observation. So now every one of these lines that I'm drawing and their intersections will give us a perfect position for another fundamental mathematical constant. Isn't that amazing? Really incredible. So, interestingly, I can start and go here up to this corner up here. And this gives me the square root of 13. This length right here, right across from side to side, or from here, excuse me, to here. Yep. Is the square root of 10. I can even go from here down to here. Let's see, where's my center go? Here's right here, here, and it goes to here. Yeah, right there. And that should give me the square root of 6. And the square root of 4 is simply going to be these lines as well of the flower of life, which is this intersection here, right, down to here. So this length, draw it on the bottom, gives me root 4. I think you get the basic idea. The entire universe is made out of these two circles that overlap. Now, another way to look at this is looking at it from the side. But another way to look at it would be in 3 dimensions. And in 3 dimensions, it's this. In fact, it would be 2 of these, each circle represented by this, and where they come together and merge and overlap, where this part of this is connected to another one, right? Just like this, it creates this torus. It creates a double torus. And that's what the vector equilibrium does. And it relates back to 24. 24, why? Because the vector equilibrium has 24 edges. These 24 edges are the same spokes on the wheel of the prime number pattern. That's not supposed to have a pattern, but clearly does. So that's basically that. And what I would like to do now is to start drawing some other geometry. You know, here's a very nice form of flower of life as well that I had done, because there's many ways to do the flower of life, extremely many ways. We showed Da Vinci's ways of doing it last time. And literally all of these things can be drawn off of the flower of life. So let's go into this now. And let's try using, instead of using the compass this time, let's try doing this, right, with, to make a flower of life. Let's see how far we can get on this thing. There's two ways to do it. You can go with really small, starting, or you can go to start with large and then go small. I find it's easier to go small and then go to large, generally. Now, one of the things that's kind of cool about these frames like this is that you can just start on one of the circles, and as long as it's like one of the ones that will fit, right? They will also match the doubling math. Okay, so if you pick the right one, then you should be good to go. So let's try starting with the number 1, right? 1 inch. And that's in diameter on this, it's not in radius. Now, the nice thing about this way is you've got a line here and a line here and a line here and a line here. All you have to do is match up these lines and then draw your circle, right? Hold it down and then draw your circle. See if you guys can see this. Okay. And the name of the company that makes this is True Circle Master Template Designs at www.alvinco.com. And I'm not getting any sponsorship money for any of this stuff. The nice thing about these frames also is, unlike a compass, I can actually make and really push down hard and get a really nice visible circle that comes out of this, right? Let's see if I can move that a little bit for you. Okay, so here is the first circle. So now the second circle, very simply, is I can go just on top of it, right, like this. So all I have to do is make sure that this has some tiny bit of visibility and that this line matches up, and then just keep going. Some of you might be saying, wait a minute, why don't we just do this every time? This seems easier than messing around with the compass, because I'm not leaving a hole in my page at the same time. Okay, now let's see if we did a good job on that. Looks pretty good to me, right? I've got these three circles now that look like they're all overlapping correctly. So we'll go down now. As long as you keep these guides matched up, you should be fine. Every once in a while, you might actually make a little mistake. That's okay. Okay. Again, the advantage here is you can really press down hard, and it works great with pens and pencils alike. It doesn't matter. Okay, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go up to 9. using this technique. When I draw 9 circles in my flower of life at the center like this, then I know if I continue around, all the way around, I should have 24 in my perimeter. Okay, so now this is different because normally what I would do with the flower of life is I would take my point on my compass, I would put it here at each of these overlapping intersections, and I would draw another circle. It would be the same size, kind of going around like this, right? But now it's different because I'm using this frame instead, the circle frame. And the way to do it, that I have to line up, actually it's easier to start at the next one down, is you see this overlap here and the overlap here. You want these lines, these guidelines, to end up exactly in the middle of both of those points, right? Perfectly. Okay, and then draw your circle. Okay. And then if I want to go back now, I do the same thing, but I don't, since I don't have a line up here to match it up against, I have to make sure that this line is right on the edge of the former circle that's over here. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that now. It looks like they're both lined up. Okay, so now I've got to line up right here, right? Same thing, that centerpiece, that guide, and then right down here. And when you get used to this, you can move pretty fast. And just keep kind of going down until you finally get there. I think this must be what Da Vinci used to get such perfect circles. He must have had some frame like this to use. I don't think he used a coin. Somebody said that last time. He must have had some sort of wood carve out or something. Okay, so taking care to line it up again perfectly. And one of the things that Da Vinci did that was very smart as well, among his many things he did that was very smart, is knowing that you can break concentration and make a mistake pretty easily doing this. What he figured out was all you have to do is kind of like make a small circle over it, the center point, and it helps you hide mistakes. So what I mean by that, and it looks like I wet my pencil a little bit too much there. Okay, doke. So I do the same thing here too. All right, so what Da Vinci would do is he would take a little, you could even use this thing to do it too. You could basically draw right in the center point here, if you really, really want it exact. Let's do one of these. Right? So you can use any one of these. Okay, use that one, 1/8. And do this. So you can get a really cool look. So also, it helps if you don't get the lines perfectly, it helps you to fix it. So you don't really notice the mistakes as easily. Now, I could use this as a framing background for any of the geometries that we've already done. And then you'll see that the same thing is true, just like on the Vesica Piscis, where at each overlapping intersection of circles, a number emerges. Well, so does the geometry. Okay, I can just keep going down like this until you get something that looks like what I drew earlier. Right? And you know, it's so good when you do this just to let yourself remain in concentration, but don't overthink it. Again, don't worry about making mistakes. There are no mistakes in life. There are only learning opportunities. I was very encouraged today to see that the coronavirus mortality rate seemed to be leveling in New York State. So thank you to all those that are working in the healthcare system, risking your lives daily for all those people there that definitely need us and need you in particular. See, now that's pretty good. Now I'll say this, when you're making small circles, these frames are a lot freaking easier. I'm telling you, way easier. When you're making large circles, much easier to use the compass. But for small circles, it's hard to beat this. I mean, to get it that exact, not easy to do with a tiny, tiny little compass. It's very difficult. And I've got tiny compasses, right? Here's one of my small ones, right? I have another small one. And where did it go? Oh, here it is. Here's another really small one. But you know what? For small circles, I definitely prefer this without a doubt. So let's keep going. Let's go back to our 1 inch, and now let's go to the other side. And the same thing holds true, right? So we're going to start here. And I'm just going to go around, just like I did on the other side. One thing you have to be careful of, though, sometimes your finger can get in the way. So be careful to not get your finger in the way. Now, lots of people have asked me, how can you learn more about the work that I work on and other people on my team, etc.? And one very easy way is to take a course that I have on Resonance Academy. I'll still continue to do this during the quarantine, but once the quarantine's over, I won't be able to continue because I'll be back in my office doing regular things. But the course is available on Resonance Academy. It's also available on my website, Robert Edward Grant. And in this course, I'm not only teaching math, I'm also teaching alchemy. And it's not something that I want to be available to everybody. Everyone's invited, but I don't want it to be open on YouTube so that people can misconstrue it or misunderstand it. It's very important, and I'll call it sacred to me. So there's a doorway that I want people to go through, and the right people, they'll know that it's something that they should be learning more about. And the other thing that I touch upon in that work is something called the great work, also in Latin referred to as the magnum opus, or the opus magnum, the great work. I really truly believe that what's happening in the world today is the precursor to a dramatic global shift, change in human consciousness, the nature of how we see ourselves even. Let's keep going on this. And this time, I want you guys to really, if you're going to send me pictures of the ones that you think are truly representative of your best work on trying to get this perfect flower of life, because I think there's something very special about drawing this flower of life. If you get it perfect or very close to perfect, it's going to have a big impact on how you think, how you see the world. You saw how many times Da Vinci drew the flower of life. I don't think it was just because he was fascinated by the pattern. I think he knew that there's something fundamentally important to it. I'm not trying to go on top of these circles because they're already, the paper is kind of made of cloth in part. And if I push down too hard or draw over it, it could tear the paper. That's why I'm avoiding it, not for any other reason. Now, if you guys are interested also in like Q&A work on you know what I do, I encourage you to go and watch on YouTube, on Facebook, excuse me, either on my page or the Unify page, the interview that I just did with Unify, because I take the time to explain a lot of correspondences in there that I haven't really covered it all in this. Why planets are the certain size that they are, and what the purpose is of their distance between the planets, the distance from the sun to each of those planets. You know, it's interesting, the Sumerians, they had these stelas and tablets, and on one of their tablets, they show the solar system as having 9 planets. Which is kind of amazing because I don't think Neptune wasn't even discovered until not very long ago. Pluto was discovered, I think it was like the early 20th century. Even though Pluto's recently been demoted from when I was in school, got demoted to a dwarf. Not considered a planet, I still think it's a planet. It's pretty funny when the new head of I think it was NASA, came in the Trump administration. He said one of the first things he wants to do is promote Pluto back to a planet. I thought that was funny. I'm like, I don't think we're the ones that can actually promote a planet. But the interesting thing about the Sumerians is they knew, amazingly, they referred to Earth as the 7th planet, not the 3rd. And the reason why they referred to it as the 7th planet is because it was the 7th from the outside. If you were to look at Earth from the outside or look at the solar system from outside the solar system, you would say Earth was the 7th planet as you got closer and closer to the sun. The first planet being Pluto. Interesting perspective. As I mentioned last time, you know, they're the ones that came up with our time system, giving us 86,400 seconds in a day, which also happens to just be the equatorial diameter of the sun in miles, divided by 10. And you're like, how could that be? So this is kind of coming together, right? Pretty simple. So let's keep going. Let's see how far we can get on this. We have to probably speed up a little bit here. Okay. Okay, go faster. This is more exacting, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But I don't have to make as many mistakes when I use this frame. And these frames are very easy to buy. You can get them online for companies that are shipping and everything still. Or you can, sometimes you'll even find them in drugstores. It's rare, but you can. I have. Now, of course, once I get done with these 61 circles that I'm making here on my 24, which is a match of this vector equilibrium. So I've got 9 down here, 8, 7, 6. It gets easier as I go by because basically I'm getting, closer and closer to where I have less and less circles to draw. So here, again, match that on this side, just like that. I'm not pressing down quite as hard so I don't damage the paper. So now if anyone asks you, what does the flower of life do? Most people might just say, oh, that's just some sort of like weird new agey symbol, right? No, wrong. Or sometimes there's these people that think that they call this the daisy of death. I'm like, man, there's so much fake news out there, it cracks me up. But then again, in a way, they may be kind of right. Because this flower of life is what creates the entire reality around us. But you could perceive it as a negative thing, or you could perceive it as a positive thing, right? I tend to perceive it as a positive thing. Some people think that this is like some sort of prison. Well, just like if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. Whatever it is that you set out to do. If you perceive your world as a hell, it will definitely be a hell to you. If you decide that your world is actually a heaven and everything that happens to you happens for you, then it'll feel like heaven. The choice is yours. The choice is for all of us. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, what would you say to someone who's 20 years old about direction in life? It's funny you say that because 10 years ago, I was asked to give a commencement speech at Chapman University. And I did. And it was very interesting for me to do that. I really enjoyed it. It was a fantastic experience, in fact. And what I told them was to go out into the world and fail. Actually, I told the story of all my failures. Because I thought everybody, when they give a commencement speech, only tells the stories of their successes. I wanted mine to be memorable, so I told the stories of my failures. But actually, it wasn't only sad. What it really was was an opportunity for me to also express how any failure, if you shift your perception, can become a success. That's the key. So for those of you that are thinking about, what I want to do with my life and career, honestly, I don't think it matters that much. As long as you are pursuing something that you're interested in and you love, rather than doing stuff that you don't love and you're not interested in. That's all I would say. Don't waste your time on people or things that aren't serving you, or where the relationship is kind of one-sided. You can still love those people. It's possible to love them from a distance. But it doesn't mean that you have to let people bring you down. Anyone who's encouraging you to see the negative side of whatever it is that's driving your perception is someone who is not really serving you. Because anything could be seen as positive or negative. Literally anything. Just see the difference between Fox News and CNN right now. It's gotten so ridiculous. Both sides are so incredibly polarized. There we go. So now we have this really cool flower of life, right? And I can draw within this any one of the shapes that relate to Metatron's cube. And what a beautiful example this is of the flower of life. Very simply done. And I don't see too many errors on it, which is nice. Again, not totally necessary that there's no errors, but it's kind of nice that I don't have too many mistakes on this. So then I can just go and do this to finish it off. Right? I can just do this all the way down. So I have been answering questions in general that come up on the Facebook feed because the Instagram feed doesn't let me answer questions. So if you have questions, it's another reason for you to go on Facebook. Facebook also has all of the stuff recorded. It's just better from that perspective. And also Instagram TV only lets you have kind of like 15-minute segments. Instagram also only keeps the stuff on for 24 hours on my story, and then it's gone. And so if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. And sometimes people also, just so you know, Facebook though, I get so many questions to me individually, like as messages and everything. I don't always check my Facebook messages. It's just impossible. But I do generally check my Instagram messages. And so if you've got questions, you can go ahead and write me some questions there. If I don't get back to you right away, it's not that I don't like you. It's just that I got overwhelmed with so many questions. And sometimes that happens. But usually I do find the time to come back and respond. So I think we're coming up to the end of the hour here. And look at that. There's our flower of life. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Much love to all of you. And let your life go into the journey that you feel most inspired by. Live a life of inspiration and go ahead and make failures. Allow yourself to fail and learn. And pick yourself right up every time and love yourself. And say, hey, I didn't work out exactly as I wanted, but now I'm going to flip this to really something positive that's going to change my life even better. Anything that happens to you could be the greatest thing or the worst thing. It's your decision. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.